Among the earliest orders to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ, glorify your Lord. In another verse, وَكَبِّرْهُ تَكْبِيرًا, magnify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with all the magnificence. A believer utters Allahu Akbar with his tongue while the heart is fully encompassed into the meaning. Al-Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala said, Allahu Akbar is the most eloquent Arabic term in describing the glory and magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allahu Akbar means Allah is greater than anything and everything. Allahu Akbar, He is the greatest, the most great. Allahu Akbar, He is the greatest in His attributes ascribed to Himself. Allahu Akbar means He is the greatest in the attributes ascribed to His actions. Allahu Akbar means He is the greatest in the attributes ascribed to Himself and His actions. When you say Allahu Akbar and know its meaning, you accept the hikmah of Allah throughout your life. Because you said He's the greatest. You feel a hardship, but you can't see the wisdom behind it. But you realize Allahu Akbar, meaning He is the greatest. He placed you in that situation. You know His wisdom is the greatest wisdom. That in itself relaxes you and puts you at ease. Allahu Akbar means to believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest in His hikmah, in His wisdom. It means that He is the greatest in His ulu, in His highness, in His izzah, His might, in His power, in His haya, in His life, in His knowledge, in His ilm, in His qudra, in His ability, in His jalal, His majesty, and in His speech. Allahu Akbar is the word that rocked and trembled the earth under the feet of the enemies. When Amr ibn al-As radiallahu anhu was fighting the Byzantine Empire in Egypt and he reached to the Babylon fortress, this was 20 years after the Hijrah. They remained for months camping in front of the fortress, unable to conquer it. Then one day, they hear Az-Zubayr ibn al-Awwam radiallahu an shouting Allahu Akbar from on top of the wall. A man in his 50s. From on top of the wall of the fortress, he erected a near 65-foot wooden ladder against the wall of the fortress and climbed it. And the Muslims responded back to him with the shout of Allahu Akbar. The enemy fled while they were shouting Allahu Akbar, and Az-Zubayr went and opened the gates of the fortress to let the Muslims inside. In Sahih Muslim, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam informed us about a battle at the end of time. In one of the specific ahadith, he said, they will not fight with weapons nor arrows. They will say, La ilaha illallah wallahu akbar, and one side of it will fall, referring to Al-Qustantaniyah. Then they will say a second time, La ilaha illallah wallahu akbar, and a second side will fall. And then they will say, La ilaha illallah wallahu akbar, and the gates will be opened for them and they will enter. And as they're collecting the spoils of the war, they will hear that the Dajjal has come. La ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. Allahu Akbar is not only the beginning of the salah, but even before it, the start of the adhan, the start of the iqamah. When you're occupied with anything, that's to tell you, when you're occupied with anything and you hear Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest, Allah is the most great, it's time to drop everything less than that and go to the greatest. Problems, meetings, businesses, children, spouses, Allah is greater than that and greater than everything, so head to what you say is the greatest. Allahu Akbar is the start of salah. And just so you know and comprehend and realize the greatness of who it is you're standing before, you say it many times throughout your salah. So you know who you're sitting and bowing and prostrating for. When you say Allahu Akbar and truly feel it and comprehend it at the start of your salah and you realize it, everything vanishes and escapes your mind but the greatest. If one gets distracted within the salah, the reminder comes one after another, time and time again. In every movement of the salah, a reminder, except in the rising from ruku'. Allahu Akbar, to remind and renew the greatness of the one you're standing and bowing and prostrating for. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said, قول العبد الله أكبر خير من الدنيا وما فيها. Umar radiallahu anhu said, a servant saying Allahu Akbar is better than this globe and what's in this globe. If you were to calculate the times one is supposed to say Allahu Akbar from the time of adhan to what pertains to salah afterwards, it would be more than 450, around 450 times a day. Allahu Akbar, count how many times Allahu Akbar is in the adhan, then in the iqamah, then in the fard salawat, then in the nafil salawat pertaining to the fard, and then in the tasbih after the salawat. Somewhere around 450 times a day. Even after the ibadat, after hajj, after Ramadan, after salah, Allahu Akbar. In Sahih Bukhari, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, كنت أعرف انقضاء صلاة النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بالتكبير. Ibn Abbas said, I used to recognize the end, the completion of the salah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam by hearing takbir. After some difficult ibadat like Ramadan, وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. After salah, after hajj, some ibadat that exert wealth and energy and sacrifice, the ego may seep in the heart of the one who performed it. Allahu Akbar after the ibadah is to crush the ego and remind you of the greatest. Allahu Akbar after the ibadah is to remind you not to regard the ibadah as a favor over the most great. Rather, your takbir is to remind you that Allah, the greatest, who is the one who has done you a favor by allowing you to do that ibadah. Takbir is sunnah when you see the crescent, Allahu Akbar. When you receive good news and glad tidings. When there's a fire. In Salat al-Istisqa. During the Eids. And throughout the 10 days according to some ulama like these. Maymun said, I saw the people performing takbir in the first 10 days of the Hijjah so much that I used to compare it to the sound of the ocean waves. When riding the camel or whatever you ride. When going uphill. When sacrificing. As a dhikr. Allahu Akbar is to keep you reminded of the most great, the greatest. It's to remind you so that you will not fall in the traits of the kuffar and underestimate Allah. ما قدر الله حق قدره. إن الله لقوي عزيز. They have not estimated Allah his rightful estimate. وما قدر الله حق قدره والأرض جميعا قبضته يوم القيامة والسماوات مطويات بيمينه سبحانه وتعالى عما يشركون. They didn't recognize the true worth of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the earth, وَالْأَرْضُ جَمِيعًا, the earth will be grasped by his hand. وَالْأَرْضُ جَمِيعًا قَبْضَتُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, and the heavens will be rolled up in his right hand. وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ. Allahu Akbar is aqidah in the hearts, not just words uttered on the tongues. Allahu Akbar means to accept the legislation of who you say is Akbar, the most great, the greatest. Allah, not to diminish the ruling of Allah and not to replace them or tamper with them or agree to any of that. فَالْحُكْمُ لِلَّهِ الْعَلِيِّ الْكَبِيرِ. Judgment is only with Allah, the Most High. Al-Kabir, the most great. Allahu Akbar teaches you dua and tawakkul on Allah. You can't say Allah is Akbar and not rely on Him. You can't do that. The most great Akbar not only never closes his doors in your face, like what others less than him and besides him do, but rather he asks you to ask him your needs. He asks, is there any supplicator so that I can give him? Is there any supplicator so he can be answered? Is there any beggar for forgiveness so that I can forgive him? Allahu Akbar means to leave what's insignificant and minor and slight and trivial, unimportant, and go to the one you say and believe is the greatest. Allahu Akbar means those less than him can't help you, nor can they help themselves. وَالَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِي, less than him, لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ نَصْرَكُمْ وَلَا أَنفُسَهُمْ يَنصُرُونَ. Those who you call upon besides him, under him, less than him, cannot help you because you said he's Akbar. They can't help you, nor can they help themselves. Allahu Akbar is to recognize and realize وَالَّذِينَ تَدْعُونَ مِن دُونِهِ, less than him, because you said he's Akbar. مِن دُونِهِ مَا يَمْلِكُونَ مِن قِطْمِيرٍ. Those whom you invoke or call besides him, under him, less than him, don't even own a qitmir, the thin skin, the tiny skin on the date stone. They don't even own that. When it's your worries, remember Allahu Akbar, the most great will resolve them. When it's your sins, the most great will forgive them. When it's your hopes and goals, the most great, the greatest, will fulfill them. When it's your desires and wishes, the most great will grant them. When it's the globe full of enemies against you, the greatest, the most great, when you say Allahu Akbar, will crush them. When you fear, you go to who you say is Akbar, the greatest. When you're in despair, you go to who you say is Akbar. When you need a mighty, strong, great support, you go to the most greatest, not anything less than him. Don't belittle yourself going to anything or anyone instead of him and less than him. Saying Allahu Akbar with knowledge of it and full yaqeen will make everything that seems mighty in your mind other than Allah shrink and dwindle and fade into nothing.